What seemingly insignificant moment changed your life forever? I was picking up my little sister from the stables. I was waiting as she always took forever to get ready. I saw an empty horse box that was dirty and I cleaned it. Took about 30 minutes. When I was finishing up, the owner of the horse that lived in the box came and asked why I cleaned it. I said I had some extra time. She was so happy as she was running late for a birthday party for her son, I think. A couple of weeks later I cold called for a job at a company that I admired. Head of hour was a lady from the stables. She called me in for a cup of coffee and 45 minutes later I had my dream job. There was a time where I was working like crazy and also used to go to the gym religiously. No time for dating nor relationships for more than 2 years. One Sunday I had no work to do and I decided to go to the park and chill instead of going to the gym. I meet a girl there. We clicked. We hang out a couple of times and ends in nothing. Except that I realized I wanted a partner so badly. I joined the meeting app for the first time in my life, and less than 2 weeks after that, I met my now wife there, all because I skipped the gym and went chilling under a tree, playing Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team as a kid. The final dungeon theme Sky Tower was what stopped me from quitting piano in high school. That spiraled into learning new instruments, making my own arrangements and covers of video game music VGM on YouTube, attending conventions, forming a jazz band dedicated to VGM in college, and even my influencing career path. I have a degree in mechanical engineering with a focus in acoustics and noise control, and now I work at an architecture firm, hands down the most influential piece of media in my life. I found how to memorize things like a memory champion book. It was old and in the bottom of a box. I was in about the 5th grade. I read it and used a few of the techniques to have a trained photographic memory. This was before the internet and I lived in a rural area. Now on YouTube and everywhere these techniques are easy to find. For a kid like me, my attention was limited from traumatic household living. This book may have changed my life for the better more than I know. I used the techniques to get my GED and then excel in any job in my adult life. I was at work. I had a pencil in my hand and for some reason, at that moment, I looked at that pencil and realized that in the entire universe, this pencil was the only one in existence. Sure, other pencils exist, but not this particular one. That was a huge epiphany for me. Everything is magic. Everything is a miracle. Everything is gloriously unique. People love to use science as an explanation, but the reality is all that science does is explain how the magic works. Simple things are magic of an infinite order of magnitude, and we just ignore that fact. I was at work. I had a pencil in my hand and for some reason, at that moment, I looked at that pencil and realized that in the entire universe, this pencil was the only one in existence. Sure, other pencils exist, but not this particular one. That was a huge epiphany for me. Everything is magic. Everything is a miracle. Everything is gloriously unique. People love to use science as an explanation, but the reality is all that science does is explain how the magic works. Simple things are magic of an infinite order of magnitude, and we just ignore that fact. I was helping out a somatology student with one of her body analysis exams, and as we were chatting I complained to her that now that I'd dropped out of a certain degree, I couldn't get into a certain university for another degree, one I'd always dreamed of. She mentioned she had a friend studying exactly that at an entirely different institution that I should check out. Checked it out, applied and got in almost instantly. I finally feel on the right path, all thanks to her. I got her some chocolate as a thank you. I couldn't be happier. I found out about Omegle in 2009 from a site called When I Got on Omegle. I met a Chilasi who told me about 4chan. From 4chan, I joined a tiny chat of random internet denizens and got to know them over the next 18 months. I hit it off with one chatter and moved 2,500 miles away to live with him. Obviously this didn't work out well, but in the new town I struggled and eventually got a good job where I met my husband. When Omegle shut down, it gave me a nice moment of reflection on the pivotal role it played in my life. I was going through an extended depressive episode, on the verge of failing out of college. Dropped acid for the first time at this rave, and it's like it did a factory reset on me. Snapped me out of my depression and I felt like me for the first time in forever. Changed my major, graduated from college, did a year of public service with AmeriCorps where I met the love of my life. My service helped me get into grad school, which I'm almost finished with. I recently started a good job in state government, and I wrote and published a novel. I was at a friend's party, drunk as a skunk swiping through Tinder rating people's dogs and their photo. Everyone was attention good boy. I was planning on deleting the app the next day because of some very bad experiences. I was horrifically depressed and had a lot of bad things happen recently to do with family, dating, etc. Sure enough, I swiped on a guy with a small black puppy and sent a message to rate his Tintin good puppo. 7 years later we are married, baby on the way with 3 doggos including the very good girl in the photo. Deciding to go grab a bite of sushi for lunch while I waited for my cell phone screen to be fixed at the place next door. Turns out the love of my life is a sushi chef. Hard. The place was empty and I sat at the bar and we talked each other's heads off and exchanged numbers before I left. Now I'm sitting here holding our 2-month-old daughter. Never in a million years thought I would have a second child. I was one and done with my 9-year-old from my ex-husband. But here I am with a baby in my 40s. Couldn't be happier. I decided to give the new brewery in town a shot, one night while my partner was at work. I walked in on trivia night. Stayed to play, and befriended the owners. Jump forward a few months, I am hosting the trivia and working a few shifts. Jump forwards a few months, a local told me about a job opening in the local school system. Jump forwards a few months, I am happy with a new teaching job, making more money than ever, with insurance, retirement and finally able to get my fiancée the ring she deserves. Well, I would have to say when I went roller skating with my friend in 1984. If we hadn't gone that day, I wouldn't have met my first boyfriend. Which wasn't serious and I ended up with his best friend for 2 years. Which then led me to go to college in the town he lived in. There I met my good friends with whom I lived with after I quit college and that boyfriend. Met another guy. Moved back to near my hometown. Got a job as a waitress. Met my future husband in the restaurant. And the rest is history. End of my first year of college, 2016. Hated myself, hated how I looked but could never pinpoint why I was decently good looking, barely passing classes, and actively suicidal. Was doom scrolling Reddit when I saw an Ask Reddit thread asking trans people to share how they figured out they were trans. Thought it sounded interesting, started reading, and had a massive oh shit moment. Got into therapy, started hormones, and now I'm a pretty hot gal who's happy and healthy. Reddit transed my gender. Going to look at books with a former friend roommate. She went to Barnes & Noble and while there, I saw they were hiring and decided to apply because I hated my other job at the time. I got the job, made friends with a random dude, who years later invited me to his wedding where I met one of his friends, R. He got us all into a group chat. Long story short, years later we are and I living together as partners. All because my one friend roomie wanted to go look at books over 15 years ago. Dropping a board. I dropped a board I was carrying with my dad because it was rotting and had spiders on it which had gotten onto me, and he ended up choking me out from it. The cops took me away. It was obviously a big thing, but such a small event in the scheme of things, lifting a piece of wood, something we had done thousands of times together. We lived in an old house and he was into construction DIY projects, so we always lifted plywood, plaster, etc. would lead to the final thing. I had just had a huge breakup and was in a very unstable place mentally at 21 years old. I decided to go and walk around the nearby mall and saw an Air Force recruiter's office. I decided what the hell and joined the Air Force without putting any real thought into it. I only served 7 years but I met my amazing husband while in, traveled to over 20 different countries and lived in several different states. I also got my college degree. Would do the same thing again in a heartbeat. Discovering a satirical life planning book while browsing a bookstore that was so funny I bought a copy on the spot. 10 years later it's been bought at least 10 times as a gift for others, as used by myself, my mom and our respective friends for every birthday to see what our goals for that year. An example is at age 41 your goal is to move to the suburbs. Your goal for age 42 is to join the swinging scene, smiley face. My sister sending me a picture of a couple of kittens. I was upset because it meant she hadn't caught the feral female in enough time, but it was love at first sight. I adopted him and he saved my life. 4 years later and I've made a mental health recovery and taken up fostering kittens. I've gotten over 60 cats, mostly young and sickly kittens, rescued, fostered, and adopted out. I'm also almost done with my PhD. It all started with a blurry picture of a couple of kittens. When I was 17 I was at a friend's house and she handed me the phone and said I have to poop, so talk to this guy for me. I very reluctantly got on the phone and shyly answered a couple of questions he asked. Eventually gave the phone back to my friend. A few days later the guy called her again and said he couldn't stop thinking about me and asked for my number. We've been married for 20 years and have 3 kids. We are insanely happy together and very in love. I was kinda burned out from exams last year in college, and when I finished them, one friend asked me if I wanted to join him for some beer, but I politely refused him because I wanted to return to my hometown as quickly as possible. But then one of my girlfriends at the time asked me if I wanted to go out and celebrate with some of her friends, said yes, met one of her friends, and now I got my first relationship with the best girl I could have ever imagined. Ex-girlfriend gave me a book. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, book mentioned a trail in Spain. Walked the trail in Spain. Our Camino de Santiago first time out of the US. Met amazing people. Made friends from Brazil, New York, Belgium. Traveled to Brazil with woman from Belgium. Tried to learn Spanish Portuguese. Love for walking took me to Scotland to walk another trail, our West Highland Way, now considering buying property in Scotland. Didn't go to college one day because the new FIFA come out. Was the second day of term. I ended up deciding I couldn't be bothered to go to college again, but feeling bad I wasn't gonna be a bum. So decided I was gonna apply to some IT apprenticeships. After applying for one, went back to playing FIFA. Ended up getting that apprenticeship and started a career in IT, and 11 years later I'm earning more than I ever expected to earn. Now I've moved to cybersecurity. Was introduced to note flight by a friend of mine in middle school, inspired me to start writing music again. For my senior year of high school, the school's orchestra was the first to perform a piece I wrote. I was in the orchestra, and the orchestra teacher was more than happy to add my piece to the selections that would be played. I have continued to write music, but with college taking up most of my time, I am mostly writing for personal use.